Boring insect pests. Like the biting and chewing pests, boring insects use their mandibular pair to feed. The difference between these pests and those of the first section is that boring pests approach their feeding in a different way. Boring pests bore or drill into and or under wood, seeds, stems, bark, and other rigid components of plants. Boring may be accomplished to feed, live, and or reproduce, and may be performed during the larvae or adult phases, such as the boring insect larvae and adults in the photo on the right. Why might boring cause damage to crops? Discuss. Boring insect pests rarely attack healthy plants. If you discover boring insects in your crops, remember to examine further for additional pests or pathogens. Possible effects of boring insect pests include additional pests or pathogens due to the open tunnel, loss of plant stability and vigor, destruction of nutrient pathways, and decline in plant health or even death. While boring pests do not have distinct mouth parts for boring, they've evolved and adapted their mouth parts and heads to allow for tunneling. The most common adaptation is of the boring insect's head. The head shapes affect the emergence holes created by boring, as in the examples below. Oval holes are caused by flathead borers or old house borers. Large round holes are roundhead borers and carpenter bees, and small round holes like these shown are anabid and lictid powder post beetles. Weevil, including the weevil species shown. Weevils are insect pests with a pronounced snout used for boring. Globally, there are almost 100,000 species of weevils, including several that impact the crops of equatorial Africa and other tropical climates. Weevils often attack crops after harvest, during storage, or in marketing. Weevil eggs are laid within cuts or tears in trees or within grains or fruits, making them hard to identify externally. Generally, weevils are compact insects, black or dark brown in color. Each species has different textures and accent colors, but all have the pronounced snout as shown below. Signs of damage by weevil include lesions, flecking, and or streaks of stem and inflorescence, unusual odor of the fruit and or plant, dead heart when the youngest leaves are white and or misshapen when they unfurl, fruits with obvious exit holes, malformed skin, abnormal shapes, leaves of abnormal colors, yellowed or dead, signs of internal feeding and boring on stems, leaves, and or fruit, as with the cross-section of mango in the photo, dieback and or death, blight of the plant, premature drop of fruits, necrosis of the plant or fruits. Weevils cause significant damage when infecting stored products. Insect pests such as the weevil cause a loss of approximately 1/3 of global grain production each year while the crops are in storage. Tropical crops most impacted by the weevil include grains such as wheat, sorghum, millet, and rice, fruit such as mango and peaches, legumes including soybean, cowpea, and chickpea, palms, taro, and cassava, maize. Damage by weevil can be prevented, treated, or controlled by growing resistant crop strains, inspection and quarantine, proper agricultural hygiene and sanitation, subjecting crops to extreme temperatures upon storage to kill any insects, maintaining a storage environment controlled for atmosphere, temperature, and humidity, insecticide or pesticide, although many weevils are resistant. Tomato leaf miner, Thoramea absoluta. Unlike the many other boring insects, the many species of leaf miner insects bore into and feed from the interior of leaves. Despite its name, tomato leaf miner larvae cause damage to a variety of crops. Its presence has spread throughout Africa in the approximately 15 years since the tomato leaf miner was discovered on the continent. Larvae are whitish when emerging from eggs, turning green and then to colors dependent on the crop being eaten. Adult leaf miner moths are patterned in brown, gray, and silvers. All parts of the plant are impacted by the tomato leaf miner. Signs of damage include on fruits, stunted growth, abnormal shape, external or internal signs of feeding such as exit holes, and premature drop. On stems, growing point, and inflorescence, dieback, dead heart, distortion, wilt, signs of external or internal damage, lesions, fall, or shedding. Leaves, distorted or abnormal forms, signs of internal or external feeding, necrotic areas, rolled or folded leaves. Tropical climate crops susceptible to damage by the tomato leaf miner larvae include nightshades, such as tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants, tubers, such as potatoes and beetroot, watermelon, cucumber, tobaccos, legumes, and spinach. Tomato leaf miner damage can be prevented, controlled, or treated by proper agricultural management, hygiene, and sanitation, such as crop rotation and removal of debris following harvest. Introduction or encouragement of natural predators, such as certain fungi and nematodes. Use of chemical pheromones, as in the photo below. Planting of resistant crop strains. Application of insecticide or pesticide. Intercropping or trap cropping. Stem borer, Meliarpha separatella, Hypothenemus hampii, and Sesamia cretica. There are many species of stem-boring insects. The information reviewed overviews the African white rice borer, coffee berry borer, and greater sugarcane borer, respectively. These species cause the most significant damage to tropical climate crops, but they are only 3 examples of stem borers impacting tropical agriculture. The adult coffee berry borer causes damage in the same way that the larvae of the greater sugarcane borer and African white rice borer do. Infestations can only be confirmed by cutting open the plant parts. Signs of damage include external or internal feeding throughout the whole plant and or on leaves, fruit, stems, and or seeds. Infestation of pathogens following boring, such as the fungus that attacks the coffee bean below. Decrease in crop yield or quality, plant dieback or death, black or brown lesions on fruit, premature dropping of fruit, rotting of seeds, fruit, or plant, and dead heart. Stem borers are of particular damage to grain crops. Tropical crops susceptible to stem borer damage include grains such as rice, millet, wheat, and sorghum, grasses, sugarcane, maize, Brazil nut, coffee, and soybean. Stem borer damage can be prevented, controlled, or treated by timing planting outside of prime growth periods for the insects, proper agricultural management, hygiene and sanitation such as crop rotation, and removal and burning of stubble and debris. Hand picking and trapping of eggs, larvae, and insects, introduction or encouragement of insect pathogens, for the coffee berry borer only, planting of resistant crop strains, application of insecticide or pesticide, and intercropping or trap cropping. Corn earworm, Helicoverpa zea. The corn earworm, tomato fruitworm, or cotton bollworm is a polyphagous insect whose larvae cause devastating damage to crops such as maize. The corn earworm reproduces exponentially as its eggs hatch within 2 to 5 days after ovipositioning. Larvae are various colors, including pink, yellow, and green, while the adult moths are brown or yellow. Adult earworms are able to migrate. They may also be transported by wind or through cargo. Eggs are laid solitarily on corn silk or other plant part near its fruit. After hatching, the larvae eat their way through the fruit, leaving signs of feeding and copious excrement in their path. Larvae develop into pupae after tunneling into soil. Signs of plant damage by earworm include signs of boring, internal and or external feeding on fruit, seeds, leaves, growing point or stem, and inflorescence. Tropical climate crops susceptible to damage by the earworm and its relatives include grains such as wheat, millet, and sorghum, shown below, legumes such as soybean, groundnut, chickpeas, and cowpeas, cabbages, lettuces, cauliflowers, nightshades such as potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, melons and cucumbers, fruit such as pears, figs, and strawberries, many flowers and grasses, cotton, tobacco, sesame, maize, okra, onion. Once larvae have begun feeding, there's no treating the damage to that particular plant. Therefore, prevention and control are key to avoid corn earworm infestation. Methods include timing planting outside of prime growth periods for the insects, proper agricultural management, hygiene and sanitation such as deep plowing and removal and burning of stubble and debris, introduction or encouragement of parasites or earworm pathogens, monitoring populations through use of pheromones as in the photo, planting of resistant crop strains, application of insecticide or pesticide, and intercropping or trap cropping. Yam beetles, Heterolygous males and Heterolygous apius. Adult yam beetles are between 23 millimeters and 33 millimeters in size. They're dark brown to black and distinguishable from other beetles by two prominent appendages on their heads, circled below. Yam beetle adults lay eggs in marshes or riverbeds, emerging and traveling to yam fields during the rainy season. They burrow into the soil before eating the tubers and moving to another plant or deeper into the soil once the tuber begins to rot. Symptoms of damage by yam beetle include external and or internal signs of feeding, such as small round holes approximately 1 to 2 centimeters deep, infection by additional pests or pathogens following exposure from boring, lower crop yield and or fewer consumables or marketable crops, leaf wilt, rotting tubers, and plant death. Tropical climate crops susceptible to damage by the yam beetle include yam, cassava, water lilies, nutgrass, and cocoyam. Prevention, treatment, or control of yam beetle infestation includes timing planting later in the season to avoid beetle outbreak periods, choosing yam field location away from swampy areas, examining harvested crops for infestation and removal prior to storage of the crop yield, dust crops with ash or other repellent prior to storage, remove alternate host crops such as false yam, nutgrass, water lilies, and other edible root crops, use of light traps to trap migrating adults, see photo, application of insecticide or pesticide.